What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Saturday Morning College Football Show here on RotoGrinders. If you are mourning the U.S. Completely laying an egg in the Ryder Cup, what better way to spend your Saturday morning than to build some college football lineups and maybe make some money with that to help recover from the U.S. Of course, unless you have a bet on the European team, in which case you're feeling pretty good. But we're here to talk college football. I am Justin Van Zuiden, STL Cardinals 84, and got an old friend back in the Saturday morning show. Thanks to head chopper David Kaplen for stepping in. John is out this week. He should be back next week. But Chop, it's been a while since we've done a show together, so good talking with you. How's things going?
It's going good. I'm hoping, Squirrel, I hosted a show and Squirrel won $1 million. So hopefully we can do the similar thing here. You can host it. I come on and join you, and I win the $50K on DraftKings or something like that. That'd be nice.
It's not quite $1 million, but that would still feel pretty good. Pretty good Saturday's work if we can take down that top prize. So we'll see if we can make the magic happen here on this Saturday. We're fully into conference play now. No more of the shenanigans. Most of these teams that are on the main slate today, we've seen before. We've got some decent night games tonight as well. So we'll break it down here for you over the next 50 minutes or so. And we'll go ahead and dig in. We usually start just with a general overview of the injury front. And frankly, knock on wood, we've had a pretty good luck this year in terms of not being stricken with a ton of injury news on the main slate or a lot of chaos. It's probably coming at some point. Colorado has kind of been the main team that we've been monitoring. Of course, they've been without Travis Hunter for a couple of weeks now. Xavier Weaver was questionable throughout the week after leaving last week's game early, but it sounds like he is expected to go today. And really seems pretty quiet otherwise, outside of Rocket Sanders for Arkansas coming back today. Anything that you are keeping an eye on from an injury or news perspective that has changed the way you're building your lineups today?
I think you nailed the big ones. Rocket Sanders is a big one because when he's healthy, he's one of the best in the country, fantasy and real life. So I was keeping an eye on that one. Weaver, I was keeping an eye on because I don't necessarily want to go overweight on Weaver or anything like that. But, man, if he was out or limited, I wanted those other receivers. So I got my eyes on that, but it looks like he's going to suit up, so we got to do with it. Otherwise, there's not a lot. I'm kind of keeping – sounds weird, I know, but I'm keeping an eye on the California quarterback situation out there. I wouldn't mind throwing some GPP darts at Sam Jackson if he's the one who gets to start, which we think he is right now. So I got my eyeballs on that one, and other than that, I'm just perusing through. I don't think I see a whole lot of other maybe the Clemson second wide receiver spot. We're seeing if Antonio Williams suits up today. I don't want to play him regardless, but if he doesn't play, I certainly want to get my Tyler Brown in there. So. Just the minor things like that, but I think you touched on the major ones.
The Cal game is a 3:00 start, so just to add on to that, Finley is questionable, but even if active, it sounds like there could be a competition there. He's been pretty bad through the first few games of the season, so if he's out, that makes Jackson a little bit more secure. If Finley is healthy, we kind of got to keep an eye on warm-ups to see what happens there. The good news is there are quite a few later afternoon games on DraftKings today. We've got 5 at 2:30 or 5 at 3:30 Eastern and 1 at 4:00. So if you do want to play some guys from the later games and something weird comes up throughout the day, you should have some room to pivot. The early games outside of a couple aren't the most exciting, so you can backload some of your lineups. Obviously, the USC Colorado game that we'll touch on a lot is probably the most exciting from a fantasy perspective of the early kicks today, but not a whole lot of injury news on the ledger. So let's go ahead and dig into quarterback here today. Caleb Williams against that Colorado defense is obviously going to project as the top overall scorer. And I suppose just, Caleb Williams, Shedeur Sanders, high-priced quarterbacks, you've got a 74-point total in that game. probably deserves a discussion on its own. Colorado got blitzed by Oregon last week, but we know they still play fast and they really don't have a defense. So what are you doing with Caleb Williams? Obviously projects well, but he's going to be highly owned as well.
I think for me, it's pretty simple. I want to be over the field on Caleb Williams. He'll be highly owned, but he's actually not as highly owned as I thought he might be, to be perfectly honest. We've seen a lot of chalk early in the year, this year in college football, and the chalk is smashing. So, but this isn't as bad as I thought it would be. So I think I'm going to be over the field. I just can't see being underweight on. And there's a lot of good quarterbacks on this slate that you can go to, but for like a floor / ceiling combination, obviously there's nobody better than this guy. It's a great matchup for him. The only thing you fear is, that old thing where you just never know where the running back might fall into the end zone 3 or 4 times, and Caleb doesn't get as much, and it's harder to pay off that high price tag. But I look at him, and then I look at some of the other guys I want to play. And the names that I'm thinking of that I want to play, like, boy, they could really mess up your lineup. I mean, they seem good today, but they always seem good when they're in a good matchup. And they still mess up half the time. But Caleb is not gonna tank your lineup. So I want to be over the older field on Caleb, and I'm fine with that. And we could talk also about, he's just one of those guys on this slate. My initial first lineup I put in that's going to go in the high dollar stuff, he doesn't have a pairing with him, so you don't have to worry about that. And GPPs, you can take a shot. I'll take some shots on some of those guys, but you don't have to pair him with anybody. So I want to be over the weight on, and maybe that's the way you get different from him, is be naked Caleb, and let everybody else take a shot on these 6 or 7 other wide receivers that could have a good game. And then the wide receivers sink those Caleb lineups, and you're running him naked, and you got the advantage.
Yeah, very possibly you could throw 6 touchdowns to 6 different guys. They spread things out so much. If you do want to pair him with somebody, and you get lucky with the pairing that ends up being a guy that gets 2 touchdowns and 150 yards or something like that, then certainly you're ahead of the field. But plenty of risk there, given how much USC spreads around their snaps and their targets with their pass catchers. But Caleb's going to project well. He's obviously the QB1 overall on the slate. If we look at some of these other, there's not going to be a high ownership on really any of the next 5 or 6 guys, simply because most people will take the philosophy of, if I'm up here, might as well get up to Caleb Williams. But Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, maybe to Drew Aller, just not a whole lot of love for those guys today. And then you get down kind of in that mid-range of quarterbacks where you're going to start to see some people going with their super flex spot. But I'll give you the floor here. Who do you kind of like in that mid-range to middle upper range today?
I have highlighted. I actually have Drew Aller as a guy I want to throw in some GPPs. I think this could be a bigger day in the air for Penn State than on the ground. And it's always tough with those running backs, man. They're so good, and they could just steal the show. But I got Drew Aller highlighted. I think this is a pretty good matchup for him. Northwestern, a little bit of an uptick in pace this year. So I'm good with that. Seth Hennigan is probably, I haven't seen, he might be one of the top 3 after Caleb. He might be one of the top 3 more owned quarterbacks on the slate, but I like Seth Hennigan too. That could be
we've got him second in ownership.
Yeah. So, but he's in a good spot. But he's one of those guys I talked about. He could tank your lineup if you don't watch out. I do have a little bit of love here in GPPs for Jalen Daniels. Like, these are guys like my cash. I'll say, when I say GPP, my cash is Caleb, and it's going to be a cheaper guy we'll talk about later. So these guys aren't cash worthy to me. Maybe some of them can be on the borderline there. So when I say GPP, that's all these guys. They're all GPP for me. But Jalen Daniels, just because this is kind of like Kansas's Super Bowl. They're facing Texas. This is what they play for all year, really, is they want to beat Texas. Texas now, they've got this, I don't know if I pointed out on the survey or not, but next week they've got the Red River shootout with Oklahoma. They've got to be looking ahead. They probably have a little bit more resources looking at that game than they did preparing for Kansas. I think he runs a little bit more today. We haven't seen him really fully take off and run, and man, he's really good when he decides to run. So I like Jalen Daniels in some GPPs. Baby Tua, man, he's okay. I don't mind him. Quinn Ewers, Shadir Sanders is a guy that I'll be underweight on. I don't know what the ownership's going to end up being on him, but like unless he falls in the end zone, he's giving you negative rushing yard vibes, man, all year long. So I don't know if I want to go there. So in that mid range, I think there's some guys there. I don't know if Schrader qualifies for that range, but there's some good quarterbacks in that range. He can run, and all these guys are GPP. It's Caleb in cash, a cheap guy in cash, and then all these guys in the middle that we're talking about are going in the GPP pool.
Yeah, I think Schrader definitely qualifies in there, and he's certainly one of my favorites. You know, he's the guy. He has a 195 rushing yard, 4 rushing touchdown game already this year. Obviously, he's not the most polished thrower, and Clemson is, by far the most difficult opponent Syracuse has faced so far. But you do get that dual threat ability. He's got 12 total touchdowns already, 6 on the ground. So another guy that definitely is in that GPP upside pool for sure today. I don't have anybody else in that range. I mean, you have any interest in KJ Jefferson?
I do have some, like the one real decent passing team A&M has faced this year was Miami, and Miami just obliterated them. So I'm going to have some interest in some pass catchers and some passers against A&M moving forward. And I think KJ Jefferson has a couple of decent targets that he's established now. And we know he can run. So I do have some interest in KJ Jefferson in that range.
All right. As we get down to the bottom of the list, our highest projections in here are Hudson Card at 6,600, Taylon Green at 6,200, and Luke Altmaier at 5,700. That Purdue defense has just been dreadful. So we're going to see some Illinois chalk today, which I never thought I would see. I'm guessing that one of this trio, Card, Green, and Altmaier, is the second cheaper cash game quarterback you are referencing. So who's the pick of the 3?
It's Altmaier. And man, I'll tell you what, it's just one of those things. You never thought that you'd feel secure about Luke Altmaier at Illinois being what they are, but this is just a good spot. Would it surprise me to see him totally tank today? No, because it is an Illinois coached team, and it is Luke Altmaier, but the writing is on the wall for something decent here. He's been pretty productive. He's got some chops on the ground. It's a good matchup, like you said, and the price tag, man, the price tag is what really sells it. So it's Luke Altmaier in cash for me. I can definitely see a case being made for Taylon Green, who we haven't really seen take off with his legs yet. Like, that's what made him so good last year, was just running like 100-yard rushing bonus. This guy has ridden all over him. We haven't really seen it this year. So if it happens in this game, and this is like the sneaky game right here, it's really close total with a really close spread with a high total. So Taylon Green could get there. Hudson Card, ooh, man. I have some desire on Hudson Card in GPPs, but man, that's a tougher sell than the other two guys. He can really, he's kind of depending on his arm here, and he can be a little bit iffy. So I definitely like the other two guys quite a bit, though.
I think that Purdue-Illinois game is definitely interesting because almost every skill player is very affordable. So, and this is a tough slate in terms of navigating the overall salary cap, probably the toughest we've seen on DraftKings so far this year. It's not like there's a lot of slam dunk value. I mean, there's decent value, but not the 3K, 3,500 type of value that we've seen sometimes. So the benefit of that Purdue-Illinois game is that you can get some cheap exposure and stack it up maybe in some GPPs if it does turn into a shootout. I like Green a little bit more than Altmaier. I think those two guys would be your cash game choices in there. But they're both really cheap, and Altmaier maybe gives you a little bit of a floor, and Green maybe a little bit more of a ceiling, but I think they're both pretty solid on a points per dollar basis. Anybody else in your GPP pool that we haven't mentioned at all or worth a head nod before we move on to running backs?
Yeah, the only other guys in my pool right now that we haven't really hit on are, I don't mind some California, Arizona State quarterbacks going back and forth in the same lineup. It's surprisingly a pretty decent pace to this game. I know Arizona State is not really getting the team total you'd prefer, but they seem okay. I don't know. California is getting a really nice total here, so yeah, I have some interest in Jackson. If we get kind of like loose word that he's going to be in there starting, I'm okay with him. And Trenton Borgett, however you want to know, he's 4,800, and I think it's a pretty decent pace, and they should be playing from behind. So I do like the quarterback stack in that game.
Yeah, any of those guys are certainly better than like Graham Mertz. You don't want to be playing that guy. So I don't mind doing that in some GPP builds as well. Really interesting, dart throw, cheap quarterbacks, quite a few options there today if you want to go down the board a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and move to running back, where surprisingly we don't really have any injury news that we're worried about, which this is the position where it generally gets quite dicey. So pretty much all systems go here. You're going to see the ownership really concentrate on a few guys because as the salary cap's a little bit more difficult to navigate today. It's hard to get an $8,300 Blake Corum. Some of these top end guys, you see a few of them, Penn State splits time with their running backs a little bit more. You got a couple guys there at Michigan as well, and it's just tough to get up to these higher end running backs today. So before we get to the chalk guys kind of under 7K, do you have a lean on any of the top 5 or 6 here that maybe you want to get overweight on in tournaments?
As far as the top 5 or 6 price tag guys, overweight in tournament, I'm probably going to be overweight on Marshawn Lloyd. And in those lineups, fade Caleb Williams and just hope for the best right there. I can see, I just talked about Cal, Arizona State. There's actually some good running backs in that game too. And Jaden Ott at 8,100 probably goes really overlooked just because of the team he plays for and his price tag. So I don't mind that one. Blake Corum, I like more in the FanDuel format because if you look, I mean, he's just a touchdown machine. But other than the touchdowns, 8,300, you're not going to get many receptions against Nebraska, I wouldn't think. And you're hoping for the 100-yard bonus and a couple touchdowns. And for 8,300, I probably want to go a different route than that.
Yeah, I would agree, especially given the context of the slate. I think Lloyd for the leverage, given how highly owned Caleb Williams is going to be, makes sense. If you want to take a shot on which Penn State guy gets the run today in a possible blowout, I don't mind that. I'm off of him now. I just don't see the need for it at 7,200 when they're mixing in a few more guys this year. So, and again, most of these guys are going to be tournament plays because
I think we might have had a frozen Justin here.
it's in at 6,500.
Yeah.
And Jainty at 6,800. I mean, all 4 of those guys are projecting as well as some of the top plays. So you just got to go here in your cash games.
Yeah, it's been like the year of the chalk at running back because of the mispricing on DraftKings, and the chalk has been smashing like last week, and the whole Marshall running back fiasco we've had a couple times this year on the slate. And this isn't as egregious. These guys are climbing up to almost 7K, but they'll be chalk again, and could be over half the you should never have a guy in a 15,000 field GPP. A particular player should never be over like 50% owned. It means you did a bad job of pricing somehow. Unless there was an injury late in the week and you couldn't help it. And in this case, it could be helped. So these guys are going to be super popular, Jainty and Blake Watson. But man, I pulled up because we haven't seen a whole lot of Boise State on the main slates this year. I pulled up the receiving numbers for the entire slate, and this guy would be like the 5th leading receiver on this slate in some categories, and he's a running back, and so he's going to be ridiculous on how good he is and how owned he is. So you got those guys going on. Yeah, I'm just going to eat the chalk in cash, and in GPPs we can get different with some of the other guys.
Yeah, I think that's the smart play today for sure, given the context of the running back pool. And those, I mean, is there anybody else in that kind of price range that you think is an interesting pivot, like a Ray Davis or something like that?
I mean, Davis is a GPP guy, but he's not like jumping off the charts to me. Cam Scatterbo, Arizona State. I mentioned those running backs. He's in the mix. Jonathan Brooks should be semi-popular today. I think he's a fine guy, but maybe a Devin Neal. I talked about Kansas and Texas and how this means a lot more to Kansas just in terms of an individual game. Maybe they turn Devin Neal loose. So I could go with that route. But in this particular range, yeah, I mean, so I'm going to cut it off at 6K. Let's say 7 to 6. And I don't think if I'm in this range, I don't think I want to get strayed too far from the chalk. When we get below 6, I think there's some guys we can play that's pretty darn interesting.
All right. And Neil is a guy right at 6K. I mean, he'll have some ownership as well that I will look to get overweight on, like Chop mentioned, talking about the quarterback situation there. I do think that Kansas-Texas game is intriguing to get multiple pieces of in some of your tournament builds as well. All right, let's go ahead and go to that range then under 6K. I'll give you the floor here. Who are some of your favorite options?
We're probably going to get a little bit of ownership on Will Shipley, rightfully so. He's just a really good back, and it's not a bad match. The matchup itself against this defense is probably not great on paper, but this game is going to be played at a faster pace than what people are accustomed to, or what they think about these two teams. So Will Shipley's definitely in the mix as their best weapon. In the same game, LaQuint Allen has taken over for Sean Tucker, and he's done a pretty good job, and he deserves all his accolades. And this is not – you don't typically want to like load up against Clemson in any way, but if you look at what Sean Tucker did against Clemson these last couple of years, he had some receptions, man. He got busy in the air when they couldn't run it, and they realized that they couldn't run it in some games. They turned to him in the passing game. So I think Allen, who's already a pretty good workhorse in the passing game, really makes for a good DraftKings play because of the work there. We got Rocket Sanders coming back into the mix. I think anytime he's on the slate, like let's say he didn't miss a game this year, and you get him this week against A&M and he's 5,600, he would be mega chalk.
Yeah.
So like the only question we have is the snaps. Like, is he going to play a full allotment of snaps like a healthy guy? Because if he does, this is a crazy good price tag for him. And that's the question you got to ask yourself, because he's a slate breaker when he gets his full run. So I'm intrigued by that one. And then we get down to the Florida running backs. Those are dart throws. You could take a shot on either one. The way I'm treating Florida is I do have ETN in my player pool on DraftKings because I think he fits the scoring just a tad bit more. And I took him out of the player pool on FanDuel, and I'm putting Johnson in over there and leaving Johnson out on DraftKings. So I'm split them up like that just based on the two sites. And then the last one that I would turn to on this slate, the lowest price guy that I personally have in my player pool is Jalen Lucas. Take a shot on an Indiana running back. It could definitely blow up in the face, but you know, he's an explosive running back. It's a pretty decent matchup. It's a terrible team total here. Like Vegas isn't giving him much credit, but he's a pretty good running back when they give him a shot. So I'm thinking that the games that he's played this year where he didn't get much run, like last week, kind of didn't get a whole lot of run. I think that we're looking more at a game where he's going to get some run in this thing. So I don't mind Jalen Lucas.
Yeah, it should be reasonably competitive. I think here they've had a few wonky blowouts. I mean, we played Ohio State, I think, the first week of the season. So, yeah, don't mind him as a cheap guy today. And really, I don't think there's a whole lot else to get excited about. Mentioned that the salary pool is at least a little tighter. Like the misprices this week are in the 5Ks. Reggie Love maybe deserves a little bit of a head nod, especially if you're not wanting to play Altmaier. Again, all of Illinois is pretty cheap. There's nothing extremely safe here, but 4,200 for a guy that, you know, could get 12 to 15 touches against that Purdue defense, I think is okay in some GPP builds as well. Anything else here before we pass it to wide receivers?
I think that was it for running backs.
All right, let's move to wide receiver, where I think is probably where a lot of contests are going to be won and lost today. You're going to see a lot of ownership on Caleb Williams. You're going to see a lot of ownership on the chalk running backs that we mentioned. Maybe a little bit more spread out here at wide receiver. And so if you're spending top dollar on a wide receiver 1 today, with, again, news that Weaver is expected to play for Colorado, how are you handling kind of the top group of pass catchers today?
Probably not a lot of love for him with Weaver in there now, knocking Jimmy Horn down a little bit. Probably not a lot of love for these guys. Pearsall has been good this year. He made the catch last week that everybody's talking about, and that's nice. But at 7,400, I probably want a little bit something else in my lineup. Xavier Weaver coming off an injury. I don't know. I mean, he's in the player pool. I can't eliminate him completely, but probably be underweight on that. The thing that they did do while, we're talking about expensive wide receivers, boy, they made it to where the USC wide receivers, you're not going to do a lot of double stacking with Caleb Williams. So
let me just highlight those guys. So yeah, I mean, it's not, you got 5 guys between 6,100 and 6,800 there.
So it's going to be, it's going to be tough, man, to double. Maybe that's the way you get way different in GPPs, and you can certainly do that if you've got enough lineups to play with. So, but on their own,
are you just picking the guy out of a hat if you do that, or like how do we even choose?
I would say it's all like you kind of, based on their stats, you almost might as well pick them out. You say Brendan Rice has maybe established himself as the number 1 right now, so I'd put him at the top of the chart, but it's really close. I still don't think we've seen the best of Dorian Singer. I mean, he transferred. He could have gone to a lot of different places and been a star. Like, he was really good last year. I don't think we've seen the best of him. So, but on their own individually, like, no way. Yeah. In a non-Caleb lineup, is anybody going to play 6,000 plus, wide receiver from USC? No way. So, but my pecking order on that would be Rice, Singer, and then we go down to probably Taj and Mario, and take a shot on Branch as the last guy in there. Super expensive, but like they're not worthy of anything except for stacking with Caleb for the most part. The one guy in the higher price range that I probably do have interest in is Evan Stewart. I think somehow in a different world where we don't have all these other great shootouts, A&M and Arkansas could be something pretty interesting. I don't think A&M has quite the defense we were led to believe to start the year, and Arkansas has always kind of, over the last few years, you've been able to pass on them. So Evan Stewart being the alpha receiver for A&M interests me in that price range. And I mean, there's other guys out there. Xavier Worthy, he could be a slate breaker. He's that good, but I have more interest in, like, I would rather play Jimmy Horn, I think, just to get into that 70-plus point total, and a guy coming in out of the slot and just getting peppered with targets for Shadir. By the way, if Shadir's going to – I mentioned this in the survey, but not only does he get sacked a lot, and so that leads to all those negative rushing yards. So USC also has – they've played some powder puff schedule so far. So I'm not really saying it's, totally 100% legit, but they have been able to pressure the passer against these guys. So if they can get pressure on Shadir, maybe he has to get the ball out early. Maybe that's going to be the game plan today, and that would lead to a lot of Jimmy Horn. So interested in him, and Worthy about the same, and that kind of fits that whole upper category for me.
Yeah, I do like Horn today. I feel like with Weaver, we just don't know. Maybe he's limited in some capacity. But for the reason you just mentioned there as well, I think Horn is my preferred Colorado pass catcher. If you're stacking that Kansas game, I mentioned maybe getting some pieces of Kansas, you can certainly run that back with Xavier Worthy. Probably one of the safer options in this high range, kind of intermixed with all those USC risk reward guys in there. never have any issues playing Worthy for a little bit of safety in that price range. Anything else above 6,000 that you want to touch on?
Yeah, I would say above 6,000. My dart throw here that I'll be way overweight on is Lambert Smith from Penn State. I've already mentioned Drew Aller is a GPP guy for me because I think we get some passing from Penn State today, and if he's going to pass, he's really the only target I want with Aller. Like, I can't think of another receiver that I want to waste a lineup and pair him with Aller. So I do like Lambert Smith to break loose for maybe a long one today.
All right, let's see. Don't think there's anything else above that range that I'm interested in. But as we get into the 5Ks, your decisions in this range could be you're probably going to see a lot of like 2v2s in cash games today. That could be in between, a lot of these guys like Hunter and Burks and Isaiah Williams. I know you mentioned you're on Altmaier, so like, would you pair Altmaier and Williams together in cash games? Is that too much Illinois? How are you handling that?
Yeah, I would pair them together. I mean, you don't have to, but the prices make sense. And in cash games, I'm not really worried about upside necessarily. I'm not forcing it in there, not forcing correlation, but the prices just make sense. If I didn't have Altmaier in my lineup, I would still want Isaiah Williams. If I didn't have Isaiah Williams in my lineup, I would still want Altmaier. So it just kind of makes sense that they go in there together, and that's fine. But it's scary, man. You're putting your hopes on an Illinois passing attack, and that's not something we've really seen prosper these last few years. So it's tough, but he seems safe. He goes out there, he gets his targets, and he does his thing. And so Williams is definitely my favorite guy in this range. And then you mentioned Jeremiah Hunter. This is the chalk range. Jeremiah Hunter is probably going to be chalk. I've seen all the, you read the articles and you look at all the rankings and everything we do, and there's just a lot of Hunter and Isaiah Williams love, and that's going to lead to a lot of ownership, but probably rightfully so for some of these guys. You just got to get different in the large field stuff. But so Hunter's in that range, and Arizona State, Elijah Badger, I think he's a solid play, and I kind of like that game to go over that expected total there. So, and you mentioned Deion Burks. He's been good in most of these games this year. I still think he's the number one guy, even though his teammate Yassine's kind of caught up to him recently. I still think that Burks is the number one guy you want to have in this receiving core. So it's I got him pretty highly ranked, and then we're going to get down to in the 5,400 range, Brock Bowers. Like last time he was on a big slate and he was chalky, he didn't do very much. Last week he erupted. He's not this surefire high floor guy. He's a hit or miss kind of guy. But this is a pretty decent matchup. Auburn is a fair team. They're pretty decent on defense, so maybe they need to deploy a little Brock Bowers today. But I have Bowers in there. And if we're still in the 5K range, to me, Cam Camper has not gotten a lot of love this week. I think he goes low owned, and in a matchup against Maryland, I know Maryland can score. I know they can push the pace here with baby Tua and some pretty good receivers. Maybe Cam Camper has to keep up with this thing. So I like Cam Camper in this range also.
All right, catching up with some of the little comments that we've gotten in the YouTube chat. Josh Gillum asked about Worthy and Brendan Rice on DraftKings. Clearly, that's Worthy if you're looking for safety. Rice would be your risk reward GPP pairing guy, but Worthy is definitely the safer option of those two. I like to call on Camper here as a 1% owned kind of dart throw in this range. And it reminded me seeing Anaya Smith in there. When we talked about Evan Stewart. Any worry about the Texas A&M passing attack with the change at quarterback, or you think they could possibly be better? What's your thoughts on them, not just today, but going forward?
No, they're definitely – I don't think they're going to be better, that's for sure. But I don't think it's like this steep drop-off. So I'm still okay with Evan Stewart's just going to get his regardless. This probably hurts one of the other two guys a lot more. Noah Thomas should be back this week. He's just a touchdown machine, so I've got him in my player pool, but it probably hurts a guy like that. But maybe it's Aeneas Smith runs shorter routes and turns them into longer gains, so I think he's pretty safe, pretty fair. But I think Evan Stewart's not gonna see much of a decline. The other two guys could see a small decline though.
All right, as we move down, it's pretty much it for. Well, you want to touch on anything with Clemson or anything else above 5,000 here that I have scrolled through?
It does look like Antonio Williams is not going to play today, so we'll get to Tyler later. But above Bo Collins is above 5K on DraftKings, and he didn't do. He kind of underperformed last week when we thought he might be a little bit better. But I think this could be the week. This could be a good week for Bo Collins, but definitely with Antonio Williams out, I do like stuffing in one of these Clemson wide receivers in some plays. Either Bo Collins or we'll talk about Tyler Brown here in a minute. But yeah, Antonio Williams being out is a pretty big deal.
All right, and then you at 4,800, Donovan Brown getting some buzz with our projections. On the other side of that game, Jatavian Sanders as a cheaper option for Texas. If you can't quite get to Worthy, is a guy that I'm really interested in today. If you want to take a dart throw on some of the other Colorado receivers, I am off of that with the news that Weaver is expected to play. But what else you like in here as we get towards the value end?
Just mentioned Tyler Brown, 4,800 becomes a really interesting play right now. With Antonio Williams is out, I'd say Arkansas, he's right there at 5K. Luke Haas is a tight end, and he's been a pretty nice target for KJ Jefferson this year. So Luke Haas is definitely a pairing option with Jefferson. You mentioned Colorado. I'm going to probably bump those guys down in my player pool now that we know Weaver's going to play. Sanders, you mentioned him. He's good. California, man, they're a 30-plus point team total. Tron Grizzle has a fair – he sounds like a made-up guy, but he's real. And he's a California receiver, and he's got a fair box score, fair enough that for this price tag I can consider him with a 31-point team total. So the Maryland guys, Corey Dykes, big tight end, 4,500 is interesting with a 30-plus point team total against Indiana. And down here, the lowest guy I'm going with this week, there's no like real rock solid $30-something $100 wide receivers, which we've seen this year. So 4K is my cutoff point. Is another tight end is Jalen Conyers from Arizona State.
All right. And if I sort, let me go back to the top here and sort by our projected ownership. You can see, all the highest owned guys, Sanders, Brown, and I expect the Colorado guys to get bumped down a little bit, but you can get some of those cheap guys that Chop has mentioned as we've gone through receiver here from that Cal Arizona State game. So, all right, that takes us through wide receiver on DraftKings. We'll pivot over and touch on FanDuel here. Don't see, I'm flipping through, no real news in the Discord. So I don't think we've had any updates, which isn't surprising given the landscape of the slate today. Didn't expect a whole lot in terms of injury news. So, all right, if we pivot over to FanDuel, I like to highlight the later games and or the early games that aren't on the DraftKings slate. We've got your Houston Cougars on the FanDuel slate today. Lots of interesting games on the ledger here that we're not getting over on DraftKings. So as of now, I've just highlighted the FanDuel guys that aren't also on the DK slate. So that will also be, a factor. If you're playing the late slate on DraftKings, a lot of these guys will be available there as well. But who are some of the guys that you have interest in over on FanDuel that we haven't talked about yet?
So on FanDuel, quarterbacks, Joe Milton should be a pretty high-paced game against South Carolina. Joe Milton, I definitely want to have him. I got him in some higher dollar stuff. I like Joe Milton. Jaden Daniels is going to be popular. He's been explosive ever since that first game he's come on. Dylan Gabriel's another high-priced guy over there you can play. In that high-price range at quarterback, though, Joe Milton is my guy. But they do give us a cheapish quarterback on this slate that I really like, and that's Baron Morton, Texas Tech. He's a young guy. I think he's a true sophomore, maybe a redshirt sophomore. But, he got us some time last year, and when he did, for the most part, he was pretty explosive in the passing game. He showed a lot. He showed a lot to me, so I'm willing to play him against Houston this week. I really don't know what to expect out of this team on defense. So Morton at 7,800 is definitely a guy that's going to be in the mix for me over there.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore that price point too. 7,800 on FanDuel is really, really affordable when you consider that some of the top end guys are generally upwards of 12K. The LSU Ole Miss game will get some attention on FanDuel, and I don't think that one's I can't remember now. I have to go back and look. I don't think that one's on the DraftKings night slate because it starts at 6. But you've got Jaden Daniels, Jackson Dart in that game. Of course, the LSU pass offense has looked much better the last few weeks since that season opening loss. You've had Daniels and Neighbors go off a couple times. Brian Thomas had a big game last week. So, it just big time upside from that offense. Let's see if we go to the other positions here. So the other guys who are projecting well on FanDuel, we've got Amani Bailey against West Virginia, has kind of become the workhorse there for TCU. Taj Brooks, particularly if you're not on Baron Morton, Brooks has kind of become the clear-cut RB1 at Texas Tech. What are you looking at here for the other skill positions on FanDuel?
Yeah, the two guys you mentioned, the Taj Brooks projections that we're seeing, man, that jumps out to me. We're really giving him quite a nice projection there, so you can't ignore it. And you just never know how Texas Tech is going to come out and play in this kind of a game, pass centric, or maybe they have run the ball pretty well against Houston in the past, so maybe that's the route they take. But he's very interesting at that price tag. They priced up RJ Harvey into a pretty expensive range, but can't ignore him, man. Baylor, I don't know what happened to Baylor, but they used to be really good and solid on defense. This year, they're atrocious. So RJ Harvey has to be a guy you look at and consider in your lineups here, even at $9,400. And again, we're second straight week in a row. I understand last week because of the injury, but second straight week in a row, we're getting Quinshon Judkins on FanDuel under 8K. At some point, this cheap salary is going to come back to bite FanDuel or bite the guys who don't play him. I don't know that it happens this week because LSU is rock solid in the front seven. So I don't know if it's this week, but at some point, if they keep pricing him like this, just looking at Judkins last year against LSU, he actually went for 2 touchdowns, the 100-yard bonus. So he's kind of matchup proof, but man, it's a tough call, but he's in the mix. For wide receivers, if you're going that LSU route against Ole Miss, not been a better receiver these last 2 or 3 weeks than Malik Neighbors. He has a running mate, Brian Thomas. If Neighbors doesn't get it, Brian Thomas will. They're very centered in that offense. They make for a great double stack, to be honest with you, on a slate like this. South Carolina's got a pricey wide receiver, but I don't know if you've never seen Leggett play just yet, guys. He's really incredible, man. So I think he deserves that price tag in a game that could be pretty darn high paid. Tennessee's maybe the fastest team in college football. So whoever plays them automatically gets a bump up in pace. That's South Carolina. Spencer Rattler's kind of figured out since that game 1 against North Carolina where he got sacked 11 times or whatever, he's figured out how to get the ball out faster and avoid some of that. It's benefited Leggett. So Leggett needs to be in there. He's in the mix, man, for highest wide receiver this week over there. There's Bradley from Texas Tech, if you want to pair him with Morton. I have a hard time finding a second wide receiver. I would want to stick with Morton. And when I look at my player pool and I have a quarterback and I only have one wide receiver that I feel good about, typically I don't like to stack that guy, that quarterback. I don't feel the need to stack him. Bradley's the only guy I really want to play from Texas Tech receiving corps. So I don't know how you want to play that stack, but Bradley seems to be in a pretty good spot today. The Tennessee wide receivers. I was hoping for some Ramel Keaton news as far as him being out, but it looks like he's going to play. So we got Brew McCoy and Squirrel White still sitting down there. I was hoping they'd get a little bump. I still think maybe if Keaton is not 100%, maybe this is the Brew McCoy game. So I got Brew McCoy highlighted here, and Squirrel White's okay too. But the Oklahoma game, Andrell Anthony is a FanDuel type of guy. He catches big passes, long touchdowns. So he's in the mix over there. Yeah, those are some of the guys I have highlighted from FanDuel that aren't on DraftKings.
Yeah, I like those calls. I think a big Brew McCoy game is certainly coming at some point. So I like him in GPPs, particularly since White is probably the guy that's going to get most of the ownership. While you were talking about Judkins and that cheap price tag on FanDuel, they've got Vandy coming up in a couple weeks, and they got Arkansas next week. So one of those weeks, if it doesn't happen today in a tougher matchup, he can bust out one of those for sure. All right, taking a peek at the Discord and the YouTube for some questions.
We got some big injury news.
Go for it.
It sounds like Jamino posted a link. It says Zakaria Branch is going to miss today's game. So
all right, they've only got 5 guys instead of 6.
That's one less guy to stack. I don't know. I don't know how, definitely, certainly, obviously, he was a guy I would have wanted like very small shares of just in case, but you can definitely eliminate him. Maybe it does help one of the other guys. I don't know. Maybe a little. It can't hurt him. I don't think so. At least we can get him. We can now get one guy out of our player pool and hope it helps the other guys.
All right. Let's see. Javon in the YouTube is asking LaQuint Allen or Devin Neal on FanDuel.
On FanDuel, let me pull up all those salaries real quick.
I got FanDuel up here. So let's see. We got Neal is $8K and Allen is $8,100. So basically same price.
Man, on FanDuel, probably Devin Neal because LaQuint Allen is I really want him. I'm going to play him on FanDuel, but more on DraftKings because I think there's a lot of reception upside with him, which you don't get rewarded for as much on FanDuel. So I would say Devin Neal.
All right. I like Neal as well. And I tag Neal on DraftKings too, even though he's a little pricier, I think, over there. But we're going to get some of the USC questions coming in. Let's see. So, I mean, it's really tough. I think one was Taj Washington or Rice. I think I like Rice a little bit better, but I mean, you can ask the Magic 8 Ball 8 different times and get 8 different answers there. So Evan Stewart or Weaver on DK?
Evan Stewart for me.
All right. Let's see. Don't see anything else injury-wise. Somebody's asking, can you play Lucas in cash?
Definitely. You need some salary savings anyway. And he's anytime you go into that range of price tags on a slate like this, you're taking a chance. So you might as well take a chance on a running back at least. But I think you could just because you want to make sure you get Caleb Williams in your cash. And so you got to save money somewhere. So these guys, we don't have any, Rasheen Ali, $4,000 easy plays, free squares this week. So, yeah, you're going to take chances. Why not?
All right. And then somebody in the Discord, let's see, Luke Cage asked in the Discord, and I'm glad he asked this question because it was something I meant to bring up earlier when we were talking about this game. So let me just sort the projections here. Was asking if we can play a Purdue running back in GPPs. I mean, Maccabee was the guy that got a lot of love at the beginning of the year. Hasn't really produced at the level that we saw a few times last season, but any interest in Purdue running backs on DK in tournaments?
I'm not playing them, but Maccabee, apparently, I think his whole deal with getting the limited carries was because of the fumbling. So it's not like it's a lingering injury or anything like that. If you think he's going, if you told me Maccabee was going to get 16 to 20 carries, man, he'd be way up there for me. But can't guarantee that, so I don't necessarily like it, but you could. And you're just hoping that the coach gets him out of the doghouse and back on the field, but I'm not planning.
Yeah, I am not today either. Prefer going with the passing attack from those offenses. All right. Let's see. Don't see anything else in the Discord. Don't see anything else in the YouTube that we have missed. Chop, anything else before we call it a show here and get ready to finalize our lineups for today?
No, I think it's going to be a very interesting slate on both sides, but we're going to eat a little chalk today again and see how it plays out. That's been the name of the game so far, but we could just get different in a couple different positions. But it's just going to be an exciting, fun. So I'm actually looking forward to it, man. There's some really good games today.
Yeah, it should be a fun Saturday of college football. Good games all throughout the day tonight as well. So we hope you all enjoy it. And, of course, want to thank Chop for filling in on a Saturday morning for John today. Appreciate his help. Thanks to Devin for working hard behind the scenes for us on the weekend, producing the show. And thanks to all of you for watching. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button on your way out if you like the show on the YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you want to know whenever we go live. You can get the notifications. And if you want to stay tuned to the news throughout the day, you can check out our free Discord channel. As long as you're a RotoGrinders member, don't even have to be a premium subscriber. rotogrinders.com/Discord. Just log in and you can stay up to date on the news throughout the day. So thanks again to Chop, to Devin for producing. I'm Justin. We hope you all have a great weekend, everybody, and we will catch you back here next Saturday. Take care.